皆様、大変お待たせいたしました。
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for waiting. It is time to begin the conference. We'd like to start the We Build Green Cities Portland conference hosted by the Portland Development Commission. We would like to begin the afternoon session. Again, we would like to extend our appreciation for coming to this venue amidst your very busy schedule. I will be the moderator of today's session. My name is Yui Nagao. I ask for your kind cooperation. So I'd like to share with you today's agenda. So for the first 10 minutes or so, we'd hear from the Honorable Mr. Tom Hughes, the President of Metro Government of the State of Oregon. So he would extend an opening remarks, and also he would introduce about the Metro Government within the State of Oregon, which is known to be quite unique, even from a global standard. And after that, about 1:40 or so, we would hear two presentations, 15 minutes for each of the presentation. The first presentation is from Mr. Kirk Davis, the Representative Director for GLUMAC. And the second presenter is Mr. Charles Kelly, the Associate Partner for ZGF Architects. So after the presentation, we would take a 10-minute break. And around 2:25 or so, we would like to resume the session with a talk session, which will last for about 60 minutes or so. It is entitled Green Urban Innovation. After the Q&A session, the talk session is slated to conclude around 4 p.m. So after that, for approximately 1 hour or so, up until 5 p.m., we would enjoy the Portland roasting coffee, sent all the way from Portland. Enjoying these coffee, we would like to have an exchange session, a networking session. So we plan to end the session at around 4:45 for this particular session. In case to taking photos and also recording of this session, they are strictly prohibited. Please, we ask for your kind cooperation. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon the Honorable Mr. Tom Hughes, the President of the Metro Government of the State of Oregon. So would you please give him a round of applause and welcome him.
Thank you very much for that welcome, and thank you for taking your time out of a busy day to come listen to us talk about the place that we all love, and to introduce that to you, and to talk a little bit about what we think are the ways that we in Portland have organized our thinking and our government in order to promote an environment that has become as attractive and vital as the Portland environment is. First of all, I would take a little time to explain this very strange government that I happen to be the head of, which is called Metro. Metro is a regional government. In that we coordinate the activities of 25 cities, 3 counties, on behalf of approximately 1.6 million people. That in and of itself is not unusual. There are regional governments all over the United States. What is unusual about our government is that we are all elected officials. So my 6 colleagues who sit on the council with me are elected from districts that represent about 1/6 of the population of the region, and then I'm elected from the entire region. And so as far as administrative officers in the state of Oregon are concerned, the only other administrative officer who has a larger constituency than mine is the governor. And so I have about 45% of the population of the state in my jurisdiction. And yet, the vast majority of those people have no idea who I am or what my government does. So when you leave today, you will be more knowledgeable of that than most of the people who live in the Portland metropolitan area. We were created a number of years ago and created as an elected government. And I think it is important to understand that what that does for us is it means that we respond to the wishes of the people who live in the region. We were created by the people who live in the region in order to address regional issues, and we continue to monitor those issues on behalf of those constituents. In other regions, the regional government is created by people who are appointed by the individual city governments to be on a regional council, and they make regional decisions. Those people then are responsive to the individual cities that they represent, whereas in our case, we represent the people in those cities, and there's a subtle difference between the institution of the city and the people who live in the city and what they may want. There's an old story, which people in the morning session heard me say already, that in the old days, when people were traveling across the Oregon Trail coming to the West Coast, there was a fork in the trail, and one fork went to California and one fork came to Oregon. The fork going to California was marked by a pile of rocks that had been painted gold. So a pile of gold rocks saying, this is the way to California. The trail to Oregon was marked with a sign that said, to Oregon. So all of the people who knew how to read went to Oregon, and the others went to California. Those of us who are descendants from those literate people who came to Oregon watched what went on in California in the 1950s as they ate up their farmland, as they allowed developers to sprawl miles out from the city center and then extend services all the way out to those. And we sat up in the Portland area and said, there must be a better way to do that. There must be a way to save farmland and forest land and at the same time grow an urban setting. The result of that was a series of land use actions taken by the state of Oregon that required developers to stay within an urban growth boundary, to contain their growth so that that growth would become, the urban form would become more dense, but we would allow space on the outside for, and I've actually, if I can figure out how to use this, have a picture of what that looks like. Do I page? Yep, there we go. We get a little technical help here. So this is the Portland metropolitan area. This is what the urban growth boundary looks like. To the right is, obviously, is urbanized areas, and to the left there continue to farm. That's not just a small thing. That will extend for miles, and crossing that urban growth boundary is legally very difficult to do in terms of development. So we've pushed everything into a tight urban form. And Metro, as the regional government, was given responsibility for not only for adopting the urban growth boundary, but also for deciding what land use decisions at the larger level should create that urban form within the urban growth boundary. So individual cities on the outside or in the urban growth boundary within Metro sometimes would like to expand their own urban growth boundary for one reason or another, but it has to be consistent with a regional philosophy. And so the combination of a regional government elected by the people so that it is independent of those local governments has given more legal authority to the urban growth boundary than it has in a lot of other places. And so it is as firm as if there was a mountain there that you could not cross because of a geographic feature. That's key, I think, to understanding how we have created what we have created in Oregon. The second thing, though, was that under the leadership of a number of important leaders, primarily a gentleman by the name of Neil Goldschmidt, there was a decision made back in the late 60s, early 70s, to take federal money that was supposed to go to build another freeway and instead use that money to build light rail. And it was a commitment that we started then to direct the growth in the community, the transportation growth in the community, to mass transit rather than to automobiles that you all would appreciate in Tokyo. but what was very difficult to implement on the western United States that is very dependent on automobiles. So those are the two, I think, really significant elements at the regional level to look at it from a bigger picture. What's happened then as a result of that in Portland is a world-class reputation for the place that builds a green community, that the community, that we are understood as a community who is dedicated to the principles of what we call smart growth, dense urban form, and reducing carbon footprint, and some of those things that subsequently have become important political decisions. And Metro has become the agency that's responsible for doing that. Within that context, then, we have proven to be a good breeding ground for businesses who design the buildings that fit into that kind of an urban form. And so in Portland, we enjoy the benefit of a number of world-class architectural firms, engineering firms, landscape firms that understand how to work with dense urban forms and sustainable premises. And so that now is becoming a major export for us. And the We Build Green Cities program from the Portland Development Commission is taking advantage of that opportunity. And you're going to hear now from a couple of our companies that operate in Portland and from Portland around the world about their companies and what they can offer here. Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much for that. We'd like to move on to the presentation session. We will hear from two gentlemen. First of all, from GLUMAC, the Representative Director, Mr. Clark Davis. We'll talk about what's beyond the LEED certification. So, Mr. Davis, would you please take the floor?
Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And thank you, Tom, for those introductory remarks. My topic will be LEED and Beyond, Engineering for Green Buildings and Cities. And just to give you a little background, if I can stand in front and be heard by the interpreters, our firm, there we go. Our firm has 9 offices in the western United States on the West Coast, and oh, I can carry this. Very good. Smarter than I am. We also have an office in Shanghai, and I'm lucky to work in the greenest state in the country, in Portland, Oregon. I wanted to share a few of the projects that we've worked on within our office in Portland. This here is a hotel. This is a theater. This is a college university engineering school. And this is a mixed-use office building that I'll speak a little bit more detail about in a second. So this project is called 12 West, and it is comprised of a ground floor retail. So it's got restaurant, it's got coffee shop, things of that nature. It then has 4 floors of office, and the rest of the building is apartments, so residential. In terms of some of the sustainable features, you can see very visibly the wind turbines at the top of the building generating electricity. We also have a green roof that is handling the rainfall on the roof to start the process of cleaning it. We also have some solar panels to preheat water. We collect all of the rainwater and put it into a cistern in the lowest level, and then use that. We pump it back up, and we use it to flush toilets, because we shouldn't be flushing toilets with water that we can drink that would come from the utility. And then finally, we have a connection to a very, very efficient district cooling plant. This is our office in Portland. We recently made renovations to it, and there's a couple of really big moves that I wanted to share with you. This building was built in 1968, and as a consequence, the glass around the perimeter was what is called single pane. It was only one thickness of glass. It wasn't double. It didn't do anything in terms of providing much insulation. So working with the owner, we had them agree to replace all the glass around the entire floor that we occupy, which is the 16th floor. There also used to be a ceiling in the building at this line right here. We had them remove that, which exposed this upper glass that we also replaced and made it into vision glass, which gave us very, very deep penetration of daylight. We're also adding operable windows so that in the nice times of year we can open the windows and get natural ventilation. One of the real big moves was taking the light fixtures that used to be up at 2 meters in the air, 3 meters, excuse me, and moving it down to desk height so that that reduces the amount of energy by 1/4 what it would normally take. And then every light fixture in our space is dimmable. It has a dimming ballast, and it is connected to a system that measures how much daylight is coming in. And when there's adequate daylight, the electric lighting is dimmed to a lower level. And then finally, and I think this is actually a very big move, we do not have automation turn our lights on. The only way lights get turned on in our space is for a person to walk in and say, "It's too dark in here. I want more light." And so rather than automation turning our lights on and off, it is done by the human. We let automation turn lights off because we tend to forget to turn our lights off, but we'll never forget to turn them on. So the results of this is that this is a graph. I'm an engineer. I love graphs. You have to bear with me here. This is the line that would represent the maximum amount of electricity that we could use in our office for lighting. This is the line that we chose to connect. In other words, we had a 40% savings off the top. Then with the controls that I mentioned, with the dimming and the fact that people turn lights off and on and off and the machines don't, we were able to predict an energy use that is represented by this line here. In reality, the red line shows how much energy we're actually consuming. And one of the most interesting things about this graph is that in the same building, they are measuring their lighting consumption, and they didn't make any of the changes that I just described. They didn't replace the glass. They don't have the lights down low. They don't have dimmable lights. They don't have the control by human beings. And this is how much energy they're consuming. So the difference between these two lines is energy savings and it's money savings. So what I really want to stress today is that we need to go beyond LEED. I think many of you understand what LEED is a measurement of energy efficiency that was developed by the U.S. Green Building Council in the United States. And this is simply a representation of the projects that GLUMAC has done in the last 10 years or so in LEED. So we've done 174. We have 41 that have been submitted and haven't yet been certified. The different categories, you have certified, silver, gold, platinum, and then what I want to talk about today is going beyond that. Because our space is LEED Platinum, the one that I showed you with the turbines on top of it. That project is the largest mixed-use LEED Platinum project in the United States, designed by Mr. Kelly's firm, ZGF. We worked with them closely on that project. So what we're going to talk about today is going beyond LEED. Actually, I want to go back one slide. Because if we build every building to a LEED Platinum standard, and I want you to hear this very carefully, this is not sustainable. We will run out of energy eventually, even if every building that we design is LEED Platinum. So we have to go beyond LEED, and we'll talk about how that is done in a minute. So there is a new system in the Northwest developed by the U.S. Green Building Council called the Living Building Challenge. And what it does is it takes us beyond LEED Platinum, and it gets us to the point where we can safely build and be assured we won't run out of precious resources such as energy and water. The Living Building Challenge is composed of 7 what they call petals. They like to use the metaphor, the analogy, the symbol of a flower. And so there are 7 petals. One is choosing your site, where are you going to build? The other is how do you use water? How do you use energy? How does the building affect the health of the occupants? What materials are prohibited? How do we achieve some equity so that one building doesn't put a shadow on another building? And then beauty, which is a little bit subjective, but I think it's important in our built environment. So I'm going to focus on energy and water by virtue of the fact that our firm is one that designs the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. That's my expertise and what I want to talk about today. So the Living Building Challenge is different from the LEED system in that in the LEED system you gain points and you climb the ladder to the higher levels. In the Living Building Challenge, these are called imperatives. These are must-dos. You don't have a choice. So in terms of water, you must not use any more water than falls on your site or is accessible on your site. You can't tap into the public utility. This is a project we're doing in Portland where we're going towards that direction. We're certainly not going to achieve it. There's some reasons why, and I'll go through that in a second. But this is a project in downtown Portland that I want to show you how we're going to deal with the water. This is the way a normal building in the United States is designed, and I'm sure it's probably very close to what it is here. You start with drinking water that you get from the utility, and you use it for everything. You use it to wash your hands, wash your clothes, wash your dishes. You use it to flush your toilets. We use some of it for air conditioning, and whatever is wasted from this goes into the public sewer. Water is a precious resource, and we shouldn't be using it that way. So we are working on a system called is a living machine. So we still have drinking water coming into our site. We use it for to wash our hands and things of that nature, but then we put that water through what is called a living machine. It's a series of plants and some baffled areas that filter and clean the water. We then use some of that water for the air conditioning. Then we reintroduce the balance of that water back into the earth, but we take a lot of the water and we recycle it back and use it for bathroom toilet flushing. This is what the ideal goal would be. It's basically the system that you saw before without any connection to the utility, but the big difference is that we can take drinkable water out of the living machine and not have any connection to the utility at all. We're not yet able to do this primarily because of governmental restrictions. They're not real comfortable with the fact that we're going to take water out of a system like this and use it for drinking. But we're working on it. The other imperative that I mentioned is called net zero energy. You must produce all of the energy for your building within your own site. So obviously photovoltaics is one example of doing that. Wind turbines would be another. This is a small project that we did in our Sacramento office that is in fact net zero. It was not a real difficult challenge because of the fact that the only real load on this project is lighting. So we are using photovoltaic panels, putting them into batteries, storing during the day, and then lighting up the building at the space at night. But here's the big thing about the Living Building Challenge. It's called scale jumping. And this is where you go from one building to a cluster of buildings to a whole district of buildings. This is an example of a project that we were requested to participate in Kunming, China. So the developer that we've been working with in the States has become world-renowned for doing green projects. And he was invited after about 3 or 4 trips to go to Kunming and help them, along with us, develop a district system. So what we're showing here in a graphic form is the fact that some buildings are producing a certain amount of energy, and other buildings are requiring less energy. And the goal of a district system is to be able to share that energy to reach an equilibrium and a balance, rather than designing for each and every one separately. The way we do that is we do energy modeling. You've probably heard about that. This is a small sample of 4 graphic images of probably several hundred that we do when we do the entire project, but it shows for time of year and climate and time of day which buildings require the most heat, and how it informs us on how we can share energy between these buildings. It becomes a bit of a complicated puzzle. This is an example, just a diagram of all the different people that are involved on that Kunming project. So you've got the county government, you've got the utility company, you've got the local city government, just lots and lots of people that have their wanting to reach in and touch this project. So it becomes complicated, but it also benefits everybody. Once we're done and we achieve this goal, it's to everyone's benefit. So the other pedal that we're going to talk about in just a little bit will be done by Mr. Marassi. But at this point, I think I'll hand it over to Charles, and he can now talk about other aspects of district planning. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Now, following this presentation, I'd like to now welcome Associate Partner of ZCF Associate. Mr. Charles Kelly is going to be our next presenter. Alternative as ECODISTRICT is the topic. Charles?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Charles Kelly, and I'm an architect at ZGF Architects. And ZGF Architects is a 500-person firm which started in Portland, Oregon 50 years ago. And we've now grown to offices in New York City, Seattle, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. Over the last 50 years that we've been working in Portland, we've been helping Portland overcome many of its urban design and urban challenges, and which has given us sort of the history of that has really given us a sense about what the future really holds for urban planning in Portland. And it really is taking what we have traditionally, as Tom has told you, about linking regional planning, but now and making that improvements accordingly, but also to now deal with water, waste, and energy. And hence why we think the eco-district is a new kind of planning that takes that into consideration. But foremost, and most importantly, they need, what we found is that an eco-district is, or a district in any city should be a place where you can live, work, and play. You need not travel beyond your district to live. And in that case, it would be very walkable, and you would have a high degree of walkability, and there would be some, in that experience, there would be a green connections and a continuity within the district and beyond your district. And then third, what it does is that it creates neighborhoods that support communities, and that you begin to shape the neighborhood so it supports the life of the people who are in that neighborhood. And finally, it's about energy resource conservation and resiliency so that a district can be the right scale to deal with calamity and uncertainty in weather. So I talked about the history informing the eco-district. It really goes back to when we finished our highway system, and people could enter the city and come to work, but then they would leave right after work, and there would be no one in the city. This is 5 o'clock in Portland, Oregon, and the street, there's no one on the street in 1970. And we knew we had a problem. And the problem was fixed largely because we didn't have a lot of money. We had to come up with a plan that would sort of work on all of our, so can coordinate all of the improvements that we'd make over time. And what it meant was that we would organize the city so that people would live downtown, and then the people who came to town would ride transit, and that we had more people, less places to put cars, and therefore cars were not the choice to come to town. This created a new opportunity for Portland. It created this emphasis on civic places, and a community moved downtown and started to advocate for it. And now the community is a vital partner with the change in the city. When the city was going to expand to an urban area, to an abandoned railroad yard in what was called the River District or Pearl District, which was just to the right. Yes, to the right of downtown and the transit mall. That area, when it came forward, we had learned quite a bit about what it takes to make a great place. And what we realized that the street and the scale of the street was very important. And when we wanted to connect it to adjacent neighborhoods, we came up with this. We introduced, for the first time in 60 years, the first streetcar we introduced on the street to extend the way you move through the city as a pedestrian. In other words, it wasn't to cross the whole city, it was just to catch it while you were walking, save yourself some time, and get to another place. And then in the River District, we were commissioned to make a plan that added housing to what an area was traditionally employment only. And so we came up with a plan that was built for housing and in industrial areas. It relied on open space to connect itself to the river. And with streetcar, it was a walkable place, but the streetcar was in scale with the experience of a street. So that the street benefited from an enhanced pedestrian movement, but also as it moved through the neighborhood, it increased pedestrian access, and then for businesses grew up along that pathway. And as you can see, it fits in nicely with the scale of lights and people, and really felt and continues to be in scale. What that meant is that the transportation system and the public open space actually made rooms, outdoor rooms, that were used like living rooms, dining rooms, or places that you would want to be throughout the district. And this in fact is quite frankly the basis of our now, what we think is most important, which is eco-districts, is how you deal with water, waste, and energy in this kind of environment. But the open space was key to the community because it was a place that they all shared with their kids, with themselves, and a place to aggregate throughout the district in the open space system. But what was most important in many ways was that it had to be affordable. And the city put down $150 million in public infrastructure, which included the streetcar. And then $1 billion in private investment came forward with the housing and additional jobs. And it was a very short time. By Portland standards, it was less than 10 years, and it's still going on. So you can see that it's really started to fill in of a city our size. It's quite dramatic. It has really created a community of streets, or a place where streets are used for different activities, but it also includes lots of different sized buildings because the streetscape is continuous. The buildings are not so important in defining that. But it has that quirky character of the neighborhood that the neighborhood is contributing to this district by living there and being a steward of its success, which is one of the other tremendous benefits of an eco-district. Now, how did we transition to the eco-district from just good planning and urban design? It came when we were working with GLUMAC and others, and we were doing platinum buildings throughout the nation. And there was a limit to how much energy efficiency and water efficiency you could get with one building by itself, particularly in an urban area. And it seemed unlikely that we'd ever reach the living building challenge one building by one building. And what in our building that we did with GLUMAC, this building only achieves its platinum status by using water from a chilled water plant that 2 other platinum buildings and several other LEED gold buildings share in order to meet their cooling need during the summer, along with streetcar and the retail services and the other services that are in the district. Hence, we've sort of concluded that things that are connected underground need to be planned simultaneously for energy, water, and waste sharing, as the same way that we plan above ground for the landscape that holds the community's aspirations and the buildings that can share energy and be more open to the air and borrow the experience of the open space on the outside. One of the first eco-districts that we did was in China. And we had a delegation from China who came and toured the Pearl District. And they said, you know, we would very much like to have one of these in Chengdu. And we'd like to build it in Wenjiang, because it was an area between several other districts which was going to develop and needed to be improved. But the environment, that the way water is processed, the way people move through the space, and the way plants contribute to the quality and character of that experience is also a part of the sustainability in water use and energy use. And opening windows out to the out of doors where there's lots of plants, a lot cooler, and that environment is distinctive. It also is an environment that we know that the creative class, particularly the high-tech creative class who work at the Googles, the Microsofts, and the other high-tech software companies, they like to live in these areas. And it was important for Wenjiang to have a place for that group, that industry. And therefore, it was commensurate with their aspiration. But first, we had to do something different. We had to divide up the large parcels that were typically used and developed in this type of suburban market in Chengdu, and we had to divide them, make them smaller blocks so there was more open space and more buildings fronted on open space areas that were shared in public. Then what we did was we took the district scale, or we used water, waste, and energy strategies at a variety of different scales in order to optimize that scale with that particular strategy. And it turns out that water and energy is mostly optimized at the district scale, where waste tends to be optimized at the point of use at the building scale. And taken together with the open space system, not unlike the Pearl, it creates a continuity across the district, but also there is an underlying energy system underneath it that connects those buildings. So not only people are connected, but their buildings are connected as well. Now what I'd like to do is share with you a project that we're more recently working on, which is in Washington, D.C. This is an eco-district right along the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It is a project that attempts to meet Obama's executive order for all federal properties to be net zero for energy by 2030. So it's the area that's highlighted here is mostly employment, and there's no housing here, and there's very little retail. And it also intended to change so consequently, as you'll see, the streets are quite dead, and there's not much activity after hours, that it also had to change the experience. It included several existing buildings that were built in the 50s that were really quite small in the land and used a lot of energy. And our plan included making improvements building by building over time through remodels, repurposing, and demolition and rebuilding, and adding housing and retail to balance, but increasing the population in the area by 33%. But more importantly, it was connecting what you see, the National Mall to the north, or up on the picture, and to the basin below with a green area that was processing water and adding a place for the community at the same time, making a vital connection between the National Mall and the basin. And by increasing the population So from existing to into the future, what we've been able to do is, through our modeling, is to increase the population and increase the mix of uses, but reduce the amount of energy from existing by 62% for energy, 70% for potable water use, and 80% reduction in landfill-bound trash, and most importantly, a 75% reduction in carbon. It relies on natural systems, vegetated water quality systems, and infiltration systems to provide shade and a continuity of experience and to process water. But like Wenjiang, what we're trying to imagine is how the place would be different because it's more sustainable. And quite frankly, we believe there's a nexus between the community experience, the walkability, and the processing of water through the plant systems, and also the other improvements that are community-oriented, so that you can go for someplace that's sort of not that special to something that feels more, and you sense the experience of the water processing and every move that you make in the district. Here's a photovoltaic shroud covering for water protection, or for rain protection, but the water that comes off the PVs goes in the trackway isn't cleaned. Or an area that's largely underused, it can be reconfigured to process water, hold bikes, other transportation modes as an intersection for intermodal exchange and process water. Or 10th Street, which I mentioned before, connecting the basin to the Smithsonian and the National Mall. This is what it looks like today. And what we're imagining is that through plants, through organizing the ground plane, and by building housing, we can begin to energize the area as a destination for the neighbors, but also for people who come to DC and visit. And this final slide, or not, this final image here shows what it's like today. It's really a nice place to idle a bus, and no one will complain. But it's really about turning it into something that's more desirable and part of the community that they would enjoy. What we found is that through our work with the federal government and the Southwest EcoDistrict is that we had to prove whether it was a good idea, and it turned out that the benefits outweighed the costs because the community is now participating in the management and the stewardship of the area and takes ownership of its activity and ultimately advocating for its improvement, maybe finding money from its own neighbors, but also from grants and other means. So it puts another partner in the district. So in closing, what I want to say, with upfront planning and a long-term view, you can begin to coordinate these different policy questions with the actual construction on the ground, and you need to be mindful of what you're going to achieve in the end. And it's important that how you draw the community in and how you let them participate, let them own it and take responsibility for it and advance its cause through its life in the city. And mainly apply technology as you do in Japan so well with information systems and technology to use energy more efficiently and waste more efficiently. I think EcoDistricts in many ways has a very strong place here in Tokyo and Japan. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We would like to take a 10-minute break here.
皆様大変お待たせいたしました。
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to resume the session. We would like to begin the Green Urban Innovation Talk session. So I'd like to introduce the panelists. So from the left, and the Honorable Mr. Tom Hughes, the President of Metro Government, the State of Oregon. And to his left, to your right, Mr. Mitsuhiro Yamazaki, the Manager in charge of Business and Industrial Development from PDC. Next to him, Mr. Dick Seehey, and from Advanced Planning, also in charge of the location selection from CH2M Hill. And next to him is Mr. Scott Murase, the executive designer for Murase Associates. And right next to him, Mr. Charles Kelly, the associate partner of ZCGF Architects. And finally, the representative director, Mr. Kirk Davis from GLUMAC. And the moderator of this particular panel session, he's seated on your left. He's from Mitsubishi Estate, the area development planning, the vice director, and also he's the executive director for ECODISTRICT Association, Mr. Shigeru Inoue. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Inoue. Good afternoon, everyone. So we've started quite early in the morning. The morning session had begun already. And I was able to participate in the session where Tom and also Mr. Yamazaki was involved in. So I'd like to touch upon some of the topics or concepts that were covered in the session. And hopefully, given this limitation of time, we can actually bring out those interesting concepts that might be of interest to all of you. So as introduced already, I work for Mitsubishi Estate. So in this Daimaru, Yurakusho, and this area, OMU area that I'm in charge of, OMY area. So I am in charge of the project that is eco-friendly within this area. So in this Ecotourist Association, ECODISTRICT Association, that is the main topic. So the first session of this panel discussion is about the urban sustainability. I believe that is one of the main topics we like to cover within this panel discussion. So in order to grow on a sustainable basis, what sort of players, what sort of policies are required, and what would enable the sustainable development? So from that point of view, we have invited all these experts as panelists so they can give us their input from their own respective field. So when we talk about the city sustainability, we talk about the triple bottom line, and that is we need to look at the economic aspect, also the environmental aspect, as well as the social aspect as well. So these triple elements need to be considered. More recently, the cultural aspect needs to be combined as well in order to realize the sustainability of the urban area. So I think that is one of the common ideas. So in order to realize this sustainability, I'd like to highlight some of the points. For instance, from Metro, he's shared with us various policies. And in relation to that, the municipalities as well as the cities also come up with their own policy in line with the regions, the regional metro policy. And of course, there is probably a mechanism to enable all those policies into reality. So we need to have the policy, and we have the mechanism to And I believe Portland was able to do that because we were able to combine those two features together. That is my take. Also from the point of view of economics. So we would hear from Mr. Yamazaki from now. So Portland is quite active and inviting corporate activities, developing community, as well as developing the venture business as well. I believe Portland has the mechanism to do so. And I think he's touched upon that in the morning session. So hopefully he can share with us those concepts again in this afternoon session. Also from the environment perspective. So from the environmental aspect, of course, we have the natural environment. And of course, we can talk about the energy utilization. Also, water is also a very important topic in Portland, as already shared with us in the presentation. So at the second presentation, we would hear from Dick. You talk about the infrastructure from Mr. Dikshihi. And he would also talk about how is that evaluated amongst the local people. Also, how can we develop those infrastructure that would be highly accepted by the residents and the local community. So we would hear from Dick from that perspective. Also from Scott, so Mr. Scott Murase, he would talk about the utilization of open space and how it has been so effective in the city development. So Mr. Murase is responsible for developing that open space. Also, he has been successfully incorporating the element of water within the landscape architecture. So what it is to have that open space and what sort of design would actually attract people to that venue. So maybe Scott could share with us from that point within his presentation. So we have the policy and we have the mechanism to enable those policy. And what stands at the core of the realization of the policy, that would be shared from Mr. Yamazaki's presentation. It is indeed the organization called PDC. This would actually serve as a linchpin to combine those policies and the mechanism together. So in Japan, we have UR, Urban Renaissance Organization. This is under the jurisdiction of MLIT. So when I heard of PDC, I thought it was quite similar initially. So they are involved in the revitalization of the area, urban planning, and so forth. But what it differs from PDC is they are solely focused on building the buildings on top of the land. I think Mr. Yamazaki would talk about even beyond that. They would also try to incorporate the community's voice, and they would incorporate that within the planning process. Also, in terms of turnaround of the business, development of the venture business, they would also get involved in the financing and providing the credit. So I think PDC tends to have a much wider scope in comparison to the UR that we have in Japan. So that's what we would love to hear from you. So Mr. Yamazaki, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. I'm from PDC, Oregon. My name is Yamazaki. Thank you very much for coming to this occasion amidst your very busy schedule. This is indeed one of our very first initiatives of this kind. So it is, and we are very honored to have all of you. The place is almost packed. And given the limitation of time, I'd like to be very brief in my presentation. And in the remainder of the time, we can make use of the Q&A session to add on some more information. So 3 areas that we focus in. So the first one is a neighborhood economic development. That is our main policy. So at the neighborhood area, the district basis, we try to achieve the economic development. So what is necessary in order to achieve that? So we would have to incorporate the voice of the residents, voice of the community. So from the public sector's view, we try to support that as much as possible. The second point is urban innovation. So of course it means innovative as is to create new buildings or new entities. But also we would be touching upon developing on an urban basis. And what can we do to make the city more unique? What can we do to differentiate our city? So what sort of policies could we have? So I would also touch upon innovation as a city. I would also touch upon that. And finally, from our Industrial Development Bureau, we would talk about the Clean Technology Cluster Strategy. What could the public sector do to support this strategy? What sort of receivers, what sort of receiving strategies, what sort of companies should we establish around the city of Portland? For instance, open up their office or establish their factories. So we do have these 3 divisions in existence within PDC. So this is the mission statement of PDC. is to create one of the world's most desirable and equitable cities by investing in job creation, innovation, and economic opportunity throughout Portland. So, of course, we need to have that idea of equity and innovation as well. Of course, it is a commonly used mission statement, but all of our staff, more than 100 of us, are fully committed to this mission. That is our competitive edge. And this is the diagram, the visualized diagram of the economic development strategy. We have 3 core elements. So we try to create employment, revitalize the economy, and how can we drive the sustainability? So that's actually forms the outer circle, and we have the activities inside. So, for instance, revitalizing the neighborhood. How can we enhance the competitive edge of the city? And finally, by making those creative efforts, how can we further drive the innovation? I think we can skip the slide. So we have over 100 staff within PDC, and via different programs, we are providing different financing, and we are making use of TIF. This is tax increment financing. So basically, the fixed asset tax, of course, those are levied in different regions. Or the property tax. So we actually select a certain district, and we establish a rate in which we would levy the tax. So, for instance, a school, the fire facilities, and also other public institutions. So for these, so for 20 years, they would have to stick with that rate for the time being. So the orange portion, these would all come into as revenue to PDC. So we will make use of this revenue as a way to run the program or to provide incentives and so forth. So this is how the money is spent, circulated within the bureau. So these money will constitute the source to support various economic activities. The reason why we're here is first of all, we do take into consideration the national goal. So for 2011, Mr. Obama has mentioned they are trying to double the export from the United States. Of course, this is a high-level strategy. But in order to realize this strategy, different regions would try to approach it from their own perspective. 4 regions there is, and Portland is one of them. So as a result of the fact we've been selected as one of the regions, as a metro region, we have to come up with the policy in which we can double the exports on a double basis. And one of the strategies to achieve that is under this concept of We Build Green Cities. In Portland, it's been known to be the green state, the green city. So we do have this brand equity in Portland. So by making use of this brand, we try to make use of the local business. We would export our local business products. And by doing so, we can revitalize the local economy. And of course, that would lead to creation of employment as well. And actually, this trip to Tokyo, it's along the series of activities to achieve the strategy of We Build Green Cities. Also, I'd like to talk about the neighborhood economic development. What we are doing is shown in this chart. So we try to select a district in which there hasn't been much of an economic development. So we try to pick up in a concentrated area. And we would employ the TIF mechanism here. So within this region, of course, there's always a lag in terms of the implementation of the TIF. But for different regions, for the next 20 years or so, we would make sure that there's a revenue stream coming in from that district. In some cases, they would accelerate. They will make some borrowings beforehand in order to support the large-scale projects. Also, if in the case that the revenue for TIF is very limited, then the neighborhood would have to accommodate its size, so the capacity is able to be supported by the TIF. So the buildings and infrastructure, and it would support the activities for the next 20, in some cases 25 years.
このいろんな色の線ですね。これ簡単に言えば商店街です。
So this is the shopping district. The lines denotes that. So a lot of the shopping districts do die off, disappear, unless they're located in the urban areas. And the Portland would not like to would like to avoid this situation. So that's why there is a PDC person in charge of these local shopping districts. And they would make use of vehicles such as TIF to provide funds to the shopping district. So for instance, if there's money needed for renovation, then we would provide the funding. Or in some cases, some of the presidents do not have the know-how to renovate their own shops. So in some cases, we might lend the funds so they can actually hire a consultant. Also, we do have an expert in the real estate as well. So we would also have their expertise provided to the shop owners. So by doing so, we would try to bring in the demand and the expectations from the local people as to how they would like to develop their shopping district. So we are basically trying to revitalize the district itself. And if we are successful in doing so, people would definitely come back to that district. They would spend time there. And that would make the overall neighborhood much more revitalized. So, so depending on the economy, of course, some of these districts might increase in number or decrease as well. Support for a venture business. I think any city in the U.S. is doing so. But the question is how much, to what extent should we provide the support? So to make one idea, to make that into a business and also make that into a sustainable business. So the question is how much, to what extent the administration can support, because we are talking about the public tax money. So, so this is not just TIF, but also we would also have to make use of the tax revenue as well. So first of all, we selected this concentrated area. So on the left-hand side is the downtown, and on this other side of the river is the warehouse district. So that's where, in the old days, the food and vegetables have been sent through ships. And from there, they have been transported by trucks and transports and so forth. So it's a warehouse area on the right-hand side. So the leasing fee is very cheap on the right-hand side. That's why it is easier for younger tenants or also venture companies to have their office. And I think Murase-san is making use of one of those districts as well, one of those rooms as well. So downtown, it's pretty pricey in terms of the rent, but you can do that on the warehouse district. So how can we support as a government? We will make use of the TIF to improve on the roads and also expand on the parking and so forth. But of course, that would not be enough from the support for the public sector. We should do more. So we should actually solicit more people to come into the district. So we conducted this public offering, public solicitation for business plan competition on a global basis. We've conducted this fairly recently. It's called Produce a Row. So we actually promoted this quite extensively through social media. So on a global basis, we had an application from 200 companies, mostly from North America, but we selected a couple of them. So we had the semifinalists. And finally, we boiled the number down to 8 companies. So we have this partnership with PDC, for the real estate company. Sometimes they may have the building owners, attorneys, financial planners. All these exports would be combined together. By the way, they're all working as volunteer. They will be supporting these, the 8 companies. So we give $10,000 as an award, and also the rent would be free of charge to these 8 companies. So therefore, they can very much concentrate on their competitive edge, their core competence, without worrying about the money, without worrying about the rent. And they can really concentrate on projects that would potentially enhance the attractiveness of Oregon products or Portland products. So actually, we are trying to do that final selection process of those 8 companies. So that's all from me. So it is indeed, maybe it's a very unique cluster of specialists and experts that we have in PDC. So we are very much aggressive in trying to help the people, and we try to had a face-to-face with them, try to be very candid with them, so we can truly help them. And as far as the neighborhood is concerned, we try to get as much feedback as much as possible from the local people. And we try to feed those information back to the developers and the architects. And so we would try to make those vision as clear as possible. So we try to clarify what the true needs, the true demands of the community is. And so again, clarification is the key word here. And we spend the public money based on those clarified demand. And in fact, we do have many proficient partners. So we would like to work together with them so we can develop on a long-term basis. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And as you, the audience, listen to, and one of the cores that I earlier talked about, you talked about some of the core important message, which is you are coordinating many players so that everybody is facing the same direction, strategy, and you are working as a nice agent coordinating all that. Now, we earlier said, I wanted to ask Tom to make a comment the next, but let's go through the presentations first. Let's talk about infrastructure presentation. I want to next invite Dick for his presentation, followed by Murase-san. Scott, you want to do presentation after Dick? And I want to ask Tom to do the wrap-up of all the subsequent presentations. So I want to make a quick change. So can I ask Dick to go first?
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here, and I'm glad everybody could join us today. Talk about infrastructure, how that relates to eco-cities, green cities, building green cities. It's a very important piece, please. Next. So my name is Dick Sheehy. I am from CH2M Hill. Next slide, please. Yeah, you got to keep nodding. We're a global engineering company. We work all over the world. Our name, CH2M Hills, comes from the initials of our 5 founding business people. C, 2 H's, M, and then Hill was the last name. So we work all over the world. We have about $7 billion in turnover in 2012. And we do work in about 60 countries. Next. One other thing we do that I think is related to infrastructure, and it's going to be more important in the future, we also work with technology companies. Started in semiconductors. We have worked in semiconductor business for over 30 years. We also work through flat panel TVs. Now we're working in data centers, so information technology. And I think what we're going to see in the future is smart infrastructure. It has to be intelligent to make it work and be more efficient if we are going to utilize something like net zero, or how we get to much less pollution and things. Next. So eco-districts, building green cities, obviously they start. I'll come back to this format and form in a bit. Go ahead. So infrastructure, many inputs, as you can see on the left-hand side. All the things that we think about normally. Government service is an infrastructure piece also. And I think communications is going to become more important for the people side of understanding infrastructure and what that means. The outputs are the obvious outputs of waste and wastewater things that come out. So next. I think the real key for the future is to balance these things. We've always tried to do this, but we have not been that successful in that every location's different. Every location has different inputs, has different outputs. So one solution to balance that is difficult, but that's what we need to do. Okay. Infrastructure is expensive. Electricity, water, transportation. It's going to continue to get more expensive. I think the next slide shows some estimations, please. Before we get to that, here is a few things I wanted to go through before we talk about cost. Most of the world's infrastructure is getting old, even the newer infrastructure, so it has to be replaced, number one. If you look at 4, 5, and 6, those really are about water and energy. It's a big piece that is very important. Limited energy supplies and renewables are going to play a bigger piece. Number 7, the Internet of Things. Many informational things that government is beginning to use and will continue to use as information and communicating with the public to get endorsement, to get support, to continue on infrastructure and how we're going to pay that. The public